My name is Cora Moody, and I was 29 years old when I finally bought something that was entirely mine. Not a hand-me-down, not a family loan with invisible strings tied around my wrists, not a gift that could be used as leverage later. A brand new car, paid for with my own money. I'd spent years earning it, skipping vacations, saying no to nights out, taking extra shifts when my friends were sleeping in on weekends. I drove my beat-up old sedan until the steering wheel vibrated in my hands, and the engine whined like it was begging to be put out of its misery. While other people my age posted beach photos and brunch spreads, I was measuring my life in budgets and sacrifice, telling myself, just wait, it will be worth it. And when the dealer slid the paperwork across the desk and I signed my name, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not borrowed pride, not approval, just mine. The moment the keys touched my palm, it was like my chest finally loosened after years of being tight. I walked outside with the salesman, the sun flashing off the clean paint like it was showing off for me. I ran my fingers along the hood, smooth, perfect, and inhaled the intoxicating scent of new leather. This is mine, I thought. Every single part of it is mine. I didn't realize how dangerous that feeling was in my family. Because in my family, if you had something good, something you worked for, someone else always felt entitled to it. Especially my younger sister, Haley. Haley had been coddled her entire life. She never worked for anything, never took responsibility, and never faced a consequence our parents couldn't smooth over. She treated other people's things like they were hers by default, because that's how life had always worked for her. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening to show them my car, Haley was already there, leaning against the garage with her phone in hand and that lazy, self-satisfied smirk she wore like a crown. She barely looked up as I parked. "Nice ride," she said, like she was commenting on a stranger's shoes. "Thanks," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral even as my nerves prickled. She pushed off the wall and strolled over, peering through the driver's side window like she was inspecting something she planned to claim. "What's the mileage?" "Less than 100. Haley let out a low whistle, nodding appreciatively, and then, without asking, she reached for the handle and pulled the door open. I moved fast, stepping in and pushing it shut before she could climb in. "No." She blinked, like she couldn't process the concept. "Relax, Cora. Let me take it for a spin." "No," I repeated firmer. "I just got it. You're not driving it." Haley rolled her eyes like I'd told her she couldn't borrow $1. "Oh, come on. Don't be such a control freak. It's just a car." I felt heat rise behind my eyes. "Exactly. It's just a car that I paid for with my own money. You don't get to take it." Haley's mouth twisted into a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Whatever." She lifted her hands like she was surrendering, then backed away. But something about her expression made my stomach drop, like she already had a backup plan in motion. I should have trusted that chill that ran down my spine. Later that night, I left my keys on the entryway table for what couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. I was upstairs grabbing my phone charger. That's it. 5 minutes. When I came back down, the keys were gone. So was my car. My heart slammed against my ribs as realization hit. I stormed outside, breath sharp in my throat, but all I saw were tire tracks and the empty stretch of street beyond the driveway. "Haley." "Of course." I grabbed my phone and called her. Straight to voicemail. Again, voicemail. Again, voicemail. Each unanswered ring felt like a slap, like she was laughing at me from behind the wheel, like she was tasting the power of doing whatever she wanted and knowing she'd get away with it. 2 hours later, my phone finally rang. But it wasn't Haley's number. "Unknown caller," I answered, already bracing myself. "Hello? Ms. Moody?" The voice was calm, serious. "This is Officer Reynolds with the County Police Department. I'm calling regarding a vehicle registered under your name." My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. What happened? "There's been an accident." A pause. "The driver is unharmed, but the vehicle sustained significant damage." My grip on the phone tightened until my fingers ached. "Who was driving?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "A young woman who identified herself as Haley Moody." I don't even remember driving to the crash site. One moment I was standing in my parents' entryway with white knuckles and a roaring pulse, and the next, I was pulling up behind flashing police lights, my breath coming in shaky bursts. And there she was. Haley stood beside what was left of my brand new car, arms crossed, looking completely unfazed. The front bumper was destroyed. The hood was crumpled in like someone had punched it with a giant fist. One headlight was shattered, glass scattered across the pavement like glitter from a cruel party. My beautiful, perfect car was ruined. I climbed out of my old sedan, my backup beater, and slammed the door harder than I meant to. My whole body was shaking as I marched toward her. What the hell did you do? My voice cracked with rage. Haley turned slowly, and then, like the universe wanted to test how far my patience could stretch, she smirked. That sucks, she said with a shrug, like she'd dropped my ice cream cone instead of wrecking the one thing I'd worked years for. But hey, don't freak out. Mom and Dad will make you forgive me. The words hit me like a slap across the face. Not an apology, not even guilt. Just a smug declaration that no matter how angry I was, it wouldn't matter, because our parents would smooth it over like they always did, like they always had. I stared at her, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms, and something inside me shifted. A quiet, dangerous calm settled into my chest. Because in that moment, I realized something Haley had never considered. Mom and Dad couldn't make me do anything anymore. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache and a tight, restless ache behind my ribs, like my body hadn't slept at all, even though I knew I had. My dreams had been sharp and repetitive. Crumpled metal, flashing lights, Haley's smirk, replaying over and over like a broken record I couldn't turn off. My car was gone. Not borrowed, not scratched. Gone. Destroyed in a single night by someone who had never worked a day in her life. Someone who had never been told no and forced to live with it. Someone who genuinely believed my anger was nothing more than an inconvenience. Before I even sat up in bed, I knew what was coming. Sure enough, when I reached for my phone, the screen lit up with missed calls. 3 from Mom, 2 from Dad. There was also a text from Haley. I opened it, already braced for disappointment. Haley, stop being so dramatic, Cora. It's just a car. Mom and Dad said we'll figure it out. Quit acting like it's the end of the world. I read it twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because I couldn't believe the audacity. No apology, no remorse, not even a vague acknowledgement that she'd done something wrong. Just entitlement dripping from every word, as if the real problem wasn't that she had stolen and wrecked my car, but that I had dared to be upset about it. I stared at the message for a long moment, then locked my phone and set it face down on the bed. I pressed my palms into my eyes and took a slow breath. Getting angry over a text wouldn't change anything. What would change things was what I did next. An hour later, I was driving to my parents' house in my ancient backup car, the one that rattled every time I went over 40 miles an hour. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. I already knew how this conversation was going to go. I had lived versions of it my entire life. I walked in without knocking. My parents were seated at the kitchen table, coffee mugs in front of them, wearing identical expressions, forced concern layered over thinly veiled irritation. The kind of look people get when they believe you are about to cause a problem. Haley sat slouched in one of the chairs, scrolling through her phone, legs stretched out, completely unbothered, like she was just waiting for this to blow over so she could move on. Mom sighed the moment she saw me, setting down her cup and rubbing her temples like my presence alone exhausted her. Cora, honey, she said gently, we need to talk about this situation. This anger you're holding on to, it isn't healthy. Something cold settled in my chest. My anger? I repeated. My voice came out calm, almost unnervingly so. I gripped the back of an empty chair, fingers digging into the wood. You think my anger is the problem? Mom exchanged a look with Dad, the kind of look that said they'd already discussed this, already decided. Sweetheart, she continued, her tone sliding into condescension, it's just a car. Haley didn't mean to crash it, and we don't think it's fair to punish her so harshly for something that was clearly an accident. I felt something inside me snap, not loudly, not explosively, quietly. She stole it, I said flatly. I told her no. She took my keys anyway. She wrecked my car and then laughed in my face because she knew you'd cover for her, like you always do. Haley finally looked up, rolling her eyes with theatrical boredom. Jesus, Cora, you're acting like I murdered someone, she muttered. I made a mistake. Chill. Dad reached across the table and placed a gentle hand over mine, his expression carefully crafted into something that looked like love, but felt a lot like manipulation. You're her sister, he said softly. Family forgives. That's what we do. I stared at his hand on mine, at the way he'd just placed the responsibility for her actions squarely on my shoulders. That was when it hit me. I had spent my entire life being trained for this moment, trained to swallow my feelings, to be reasonable, to be forgiving, to sacrifice quietly so Haley never had to feel uncomfortable. And suddenly, I didn't want to do it anymore. So I smiled. It was small, polite, just enough. You're right, I said lightly. I don't want to hold on to this anger anymore. Relief flooded the room. Mom visibly relaxed. Dad let out a breath he'd been holding. Haley's smirk returned full force as she leaned back in her chair, triumphant. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what I was about to do. An hour later, I was sitting in my car outside the insurance office, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. My chest buzzed with something unfamiliar, not rage. Clarity. I walked inside, the blast of cold air biting against my skin. The man behind the desk barely looked up as he asked how he could help. I need to file a claim, I said evenly, for my car. He nodded. Was it an accident? Do you have a police report? Yes, I replied. Then carefully, I also need to report it as unauthorized use. That made him pause. Unauthorized use? He repeated. Are you saying the vehicle was stolen? I never gave permission, I clarified. I explicitly told her no. She took it anyway. He nodded slowly, pulling up policy details. If you can provide proof you denied permission, this qualifies. I handed him my phone. The texts spoke for themselves. He typed for a few moments, then looked up. The liability won't fall on you. It will transfer to the driver. How much? I asked. He adjusted his glasses. Given the damage, $30,000 to $40,000. I felt the weight of that number settle in my chest. Heavy, final, and oddly satisfying. Later that night, I scrolled through social media and saw Haley's latest post. A bar photo, drinks raised, smiling. Some people need to chill out and move on. Life's too short to stress about little things. I laughed quietly to myself. She thought it was over. She was wrong. The dinner invitation came the next morning. Mom's voice on the phone was syrupy sweet, carefully controlled. Your father and I thought it might be nice to sit down together, clear the air, move forward. Move forward. In my family, that phrase had always meant pretend nothing happened. I agreed without hesitation. Because unlike them, I already knew how the evening would end. When I arrived at my parents' house, the place looked like it was dressed for a holiday. Candles flickered softly across the dining table. The smell of roasted chicken and buttery mashed potatoes filled the air. Everything was warm, inviting, carefully curated. A performance. Dad hovered near the stove, smiling a little too hard. Mom sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, her posture perfect. And Haley, of course, sat across from my chair, legs crossed, phone resting beside her plate like this was just another ordinary night. She glanced up at me and smirked. Hey, she said casually, feeling less dramatic today? I sat down slowly, folding my hands in my lap. Beneath the table, my fingers brushed against the thick envelope tucked there, its edges firm and unmistakable. I'm fine, I replied evenly. Dad clapped his hands together, visibly relieved. Good, that's good. Let's eat. We made it through the first few minutes in silence, the kind that buzzed with unspoken tension. Forks scraped against plates. Glasses clinked. Mom watched me from the corner of her eye, like she was waiting for something, some sign I'd fall back into line. Haley broke the quiet first. So, she said, twirling her fork, are we done pretending this was the worst thing that's ever happened to you? Or are you still mad about the car? I tilted my head, offering her a small, unreadable smile. Dad sighed, reaching across the table to rest his hand over mine. Cora, sweetheart, we really need to put this behind us. Holding on to anger like this isn't healthy. Mom nodded. Things can be replaced. Family can't. There it was, the familiar script. Haley leaned back, satisfaction practically radiating off her. Seriously, I cracked a car, not your entire life. You'll survive. Something inside me settled, calm, centered. I reached beneath his table, pulled out the envelope, and placed it directly in front of Haley. The sound it made against the polished wood was loud enough to freeze the room. What's that? She scoffed. Another lecture? Read it, I said simply. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, rolling her eyes, she tore it open. The change was immediate. The color drained from her face as her eyes scanned the first page. Her smirk faltered. Her fingers tightened, crumpling the edges of the paper. Dad frowned. Haley? She didn't answer. What is this? She whispered, her voice suddenly thin. I took a sip of my wine, letting the silence stretch. That, I said calmly, is the finalized insurance report. Full liability has been transferred to you. The room shifted. Mom straightened. Dad reached across the table, pulling the papers from Haley's trembling hands. His eyes widened as he read the numbers printed in bold. Cora, he said sharply, what did you do? I told the truth, I replied. She took my car without permission. Haley pushed back from the table so hard her chair scraped loudly against the floor. This isn't funny, she snapped. Tell me you're joking. I didn't blink. Her breathing grew uneven. You can't do this. Mom, Dad, say something. Mom's gaze locked onto me, sharp and disapproving. This is going too far. You're punishing your sister in a way that's cruel and vindictive. No, I said, folding my arms. I'm just not cleaning up her mess this time. Dad's voice trembled. This could ruin her credit, her future. I leaned forward slightly. What future, Dad? The one where she keeps taking whatever she wants while you protect her from consequences? Haley's eyes burned with fury. I made a mistake, she hissed. You didn't have to destroy my life over it. You destroyed something I worked for, I replied evenly. Why should I protect you now? The silence was suffocating. I stood, pushing my chair in neatly. Dinner was lovely, thank you. Cora, Dad started. I was already walking toward the door. 3 days passed before Haley showed up at my apartment. I knew it was her before I even checked the door. The aggressive knocking, the impatient huffing, it screamed entitlement. When I opened it, she looked different. Disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. Her confidence cracked around the edges. You need to undo this, she said immediately. I don't care what it takes. It's done, I replied. She laughed bitterly. You hate me that much? I just won't protect you anymore. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down and froze. I watched as her face fell, her jaw tightening, panic flickering across her eyes. What is it? I asked softly. She didn't answer. I already knew. Her job, her promotion, her safety net gone. I closed the door gently, the sound final. For the first time in her life, Haley was alone. And for the first time in mine, I was free. The silence after I shut the door felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I leaned my forehead against the wood, eyes closed, breathing slowly as Haley's presence faded on the other side. I could still picture her standing there, phone clenched in her hand, confidence shattered, finally realizing that no one was coming to save her this time. For a moment, I waited for the guilt to hit. It didn't. What came instead was exhaustion. Bone-deep, soul-level exhaustion. The kind you feel after carrying weight for years and finally setting it down. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls from Mom, texts from Dad, voicemails layered with panic, anger, and something close to desperation. I didn't answer. The next day, I finally listened to one voicemail from my mother. Her voice was tight, controlled, furious beneath the calm. Cora, this has gone far enough. Your sister is spiraling. She could lose everything. You need to fix this. Fix this. The same word, the same expectation. I deleted the message. 2 days later, my father showed up at my apartment alone. He looked older than I remembered, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. The sight of him tugged at something in my chest, but I didn't move aside when he knocked. Please, he said quietly, just hear me out. I crossed my arms, staying in the doorway. Say it. He swallowed. Your mother and I, we can help her. We can take out a loan, cover part of it, but the claim, Cora, it's destroying her. I tilted my head. You mean it's holding her accountable? His jaw tightened. She's your sister. And I'm your daughter, I replied. Or am I only that when it's convenient? That landed? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I could see the truth dawning slowly, painfully. How many times he'd asked me to bend, to forgive, to sacrifice, so Haley wouldn't have to. She's never going to forgive you for this, he said finally. I nodded once. I know. And your mother? I know, I interrupted gently. And I'm okay with that. He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. I don't recognize you anymore. I almost smiled. That's because for the first time I said, I recognize myself. He left without another word. Weeks passed. Haley's life unraveled fast once the safety net disappeared. Her credit tanked. The promotion she'd bragged about online vanished quietly. No announcement, no explanation. Mutual friends stopped inviting her out. The bar photos disappeared. The confidence drained from her social media until it went silent altogether. Once she sent me a message. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long time before replying. I am. And I meant it. My parents stopped calling as often. Conversations became stiff, careful, polite. The way people act when they realize they no longer have power over you. It hurt. But it hurt less than living the way I had before. A month later, the insurance payout came through. The car was officially totaled. I signed the final paperwork without hesitation. The dream I'd lost no longer felt like a wound. It felt like proof. Proof that I had changed. I used part of the payout to buy another car. Not brand new this time, but solid, reliable, mine. When I drove it off the lot, I didn't feel the same giddy excitement I'd felt the first time. I felt something better. Peace. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, city lights glowing through the window, and thought about the girl I'd been, the one who swallowed anger, who mistook endurance for love, who believed forgiveness was something she owed no matter the cost. I wished I could tell her this. You're not cruel for choosing yourself, you're not heartless for setting boundaries, and you're not responsible for people who only love you when you're useful. Haley lost her golden immunity. My parents lost their control. And I lost the role I'd been forced into since childhood. I didn't ruin my family. I stopped letting them ruin me. And when I finally turned off the lights and went to bed, there was no guilt waiting in the dark. Only quiet. Only freedom.